Hey guys, welcome to this episode of MSP Mindset. I'm your host, Damien Stevens, and I'm really excited to have Erick Simpson as my guest today. So before I bring him in, a little bit about Erick and a little bit about what we're going to cover. If you're impatient like me, why don't I start with what we're going to cover? We're going to talk about firing your clients, the ABCs of that, how you do it the right way, and we're going to be, for those of you listening live, taking your questions. So make sure to take advantage of that. Now, Erick is a interesting person to introduce because he's done so much with so many people. He is the chief strategist of Channel Mastered. He's been in the MSP industry for over 25 years. So he was a founder of really one of the first pure play MSPs in the entire industry. He coached a channel of about 30,000 IT providers and MSPs through his MSP Mastered methodology. Growth expert, influencer, thought leader, you can call him lots of things. He's a speaker, sought after author with 4 best-selling books and over 50 white papers. Tons of accolades, 100 most visible channel leaders, 7 thought leaders in the MSP market, 2-time Channel Pro 2020 Visionary, SMB Nation Awards, MSP Mentor Awards. If you can think about it, most people want to hear from Erick. So in my back behind the scenes, I got the distinct pleasure to do that. So with no further ado, welcome, Erick. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Damien. It's just hearing you kind of express my career after the corporate enterprise that I left. It's been a journey, and it's been an exciting journey. It's been a heartbreaking journey, as we all know. As entrepreneurs, we kind of go through peaks and valleys of success and struggle and challenge. And I've like the commercial says, I've seen a thing or two, so I know a thing or two, and I'm happy to join you today on your podcast and just share and have a great conversation and explore a topic or topics that can be awkward and uncomfortable for business owners.
Speaking of awkward and uncomfortable, before we get into how to talk about how to fire, not just for profit, but do it in the right, humane way, and why I would even want to think about firing these hard-won clients with leads as precious as they are. Let's talk about your career. I mean, you've got all these accolades, and then you've worked for Microsoft, Kaseya, Cisco. You're a CompTIA person. They want you to know. They've asked you to advise them. I mean, it seems like every company, big or small, has wanted your input and wisdom over the years. But I wanted to go back to where that wasn't always the time and talk about, it sounds like you used to be one of us. I was an MSP, you were an MSP. Tell me about how you got started.
Yeah, it's, like a lot of us that work at a job. I worked in corporate America. What I did, I started off as a level 1 help desk engineer, technician, if you will, and worked my way up to, CIO, CTO leadership roles. The last thing that I was doing before I decided to exit that life for the life of an entrepreneur was I built out service desk and call centers for Fortune 1000 organizations, and decided one day I was tired of the corporate challenges, the infighting, the noise, just the challenge that you have when you're not in control of your own destiny. Or so I thought. So I decided, Damien, that I, knew more than this new person that I was now reporting to in my corporate role. And I decided to hang a shingle and start my own IT practice. This was back in 1997. So I'd been in, enterprise for a while before then. Back in the enterprise, when I started, it was, Novell NetWare, it was IBM Token Ring. That's what we were dealing with. And then I saw the transition from, 4 megabit to 16 megabit token ring, from mainframe computers and Novell to client server to Ethernet and things like that. I think the last migration that I helped some of my organization's clients complete was migrating to Windows 95 and 16-bit, 32-bit applications and things like that. So long story short, I decided I was going to go out and start an IT practice, and that's what I did. So I partnered up with a business partner, and we were selling professional services and time and materials based services. Now, remember, this was 1997-ish. In the enterprise, I enjoyed the fruits of budget that were available back then. Enterprise is a lot different now, Damien, as you well know, and as a lot of listeners know now. Technology was more about compute. We weren't worried about cybersecurity back in the day. We weren't worried about a lot of the things that concern us today. No wide area networking. I mean, it was not what we see today. There was no Wi-Fi, right? So these were the days where there was no social media. It was like we were barely stressing email, right? Our biggest challenge was, how do I get this, 1 meg attachment into somebody else in an email back in those days? So
and keep the email server running, maybe.
Keep it running. Went from Lotus Notes to Microsoft Exchange early version. So this was back in, getting everybody's head around when this was. And when we started our IT practice, there was no way we could afford the platforms that I was used to using in the enterprise, IBM Tivoli, HP OpenView, to manage these, kind of legacy networks, right? So even the ticketing system, I coded our first ticketing system in Microsoft Access and later ported it over to SQL. And these were the days we were doing that. So round about 2004-ish, we started seeing platforms that were more kind of MSP friendly. I don't even know if managed services was yet a term then. We transitioned to selling flat rate IT services. That's what we called it. And we struggled for about 9 months perfecting that model, what to include, what to bundle, how to price it, what is the value proposition for clients that up until that point were break fix clients, reactive folks. When something broke, they called us and we rolled a truck. We sent a technician out, right? And that's what we were doing then. And so we decided that we wanted to see how much we could scale without having to hire so many technicians and engineers. So we came up with this idea of selling a flat rate type of subscription service model. And we were challenged in doing so. And today's topic is very relevant to our experience in growing a large base of clients, some that were legacy clients and some that were new clients, and what we learned along the way and why we had to make some tough decisions with some of our legacy clients that no longer aligned with our future vision, our growth strategy, and where we were going with our business growth in general. And things cost more money, so we were becoming more strategic as we matured our organization. And so we had to make some tough decisions about who our ideal clients were now, and then the gap between our ideal clients and some of these legacy clients, and what to do about it.
So let me unpack that a little bit. And again, if you're listening live, please take advantage of it. If you're not, ping us after. Maybe we can help. But I'd love to. But why? Let me start over that question. Why do I need to think this way? Why do I need to do that? Anybody's run a business probably knows, and especially right now, talent is so tough to find and keep. And but let me just start with why and what was going through your head at the time.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, nobody wakes up, Damien, I don't think, and says, I need to fire some clients today. Today, I'm going to fire some clients. So Thursdays when I'm going to start firing clients. It doesn't typically happen like that. I mean, this is something that, and you mentioned just now how tough it is in today's market, the cost of talent, the differing what's attractive to job seekers today, right? Everybody had gotten used to kind of this hybrid work situation and things like that. How do we have to adjust our businesses in order to compete more effectively and to generate the profit margins that we have to generate today when the cost of doing business, not just simply from a labor perspective, but everything that we're investing in to operate our businesses has gotten so high in cost. So why fire clients? It's not simply a strategy that says, "Oh, I don't like you anymore," or I can't hire enough people to support you anymore. It's much broader than that. Now, number one, how did we get here? Like, how do we get to a point where we now are struggling to scale because our clients' demands are higher, or we're not slowing down, we're bringing on new clients, we're overtaxing our existing staff potentially, and because we're looking at things primarily from a scalability perspective, we have to look first at the cost of servicing these clients. So I would argue that as business owners, as we mature our businesses, our oldest clients may fit into this kind of legacy grandfather. We call it with these different terms, like they're grandfathered in. They've got grandfathered in pricing or legacy pricing or something like that. And
Absolutely.
then the newest clients that we bring on, right, they're paying us our highest rate because, hey, we've evolved now, we've matured. We now understand much more clearly what our true cost of service delivery is and how to add on our margin or markup, however you price your services. I like margin because that's a truer perspective on how to add that extra profit. And then how do we bundle and sell these services and solutions? I like selling in good, better, best bundles, and we can talk about that in a minute as well. But it's costing you if you have a client that's a legacy client, and some of us, we've been running businesses like by the time we sold our MSP practice in 2007, we had, probably about 100 or so managed services clients. Before we went through this journey that we're going to talk about today, we probably had close to 250 or 60 customers. Mm-hmm. And I use those terms very, very specifically, right? There's clients and then there's customers. When we think of, who's our target audience? Who do we want to serve? We want to serve clients that understand our value and allow us to guide them in their technology journey. It's kind of like we don't go in for a medical procedure and then, tell the surgeon how to do their job, right? So we have clients that allow us to be the surgeon, but then we have these customers that think we're the hospital. They want us to do everything and they just want, a prescription filled or this or that. So the difference being these C customers, if you have a legacy customer that is about the same size and in the same industry as you have a brand new client in about the same size with the same needs in the same industry, it costs you probably the same. It may even cost you more to support that C customer because they haven't been investing strategically in all of your recommendations along the way, so that it makes it easier and more cost effective potentially for you to service that account, right? So we have this great disparity between what it costs us to service these clients. And sometimes these legacy customers can be very, very noisy. They expect your level, your highest level of service, even though they're probably paying you the lowest amount. So we're kind of caught in this conundrum, right? So why? I think that's a pretty good reason, is to understand that it costs you more money when you haven't, I'm going to use the term trued up, when you haven't trued up your existing customer base to keep up with the price increases or the pricing that you serve now. Now, that's not always easy to do. I work with clients, Damien, that have customers and clients that they've been with them for 20 years. And that gap between what they're paying and what they should be charged is so great that there's just no way that you can bring them up to parity, with the next invoice. right? You've got to kind of step them along the way, and it may take years to get somebody at parity if you can get there at all. But there are some
So,
reasons why that may be okay, that they may be paying less because they may be a keystone client. They may be a logo that you can trade that brand and that credibility to gain more clients with. They may provide you lots of referrals. Now, again, if we're looking at the balance sheet and the numbers, you can still argue, well, it's still costing you more to service that client and these other things. So sometimes there's a value on keeping a legacy customer or client that supersedes those costs. But you as a business owner have to determine that yourself. So really, we're just talking about how do we maximize our profit? How do we charge what we need to be charging so that we can, number one, keep our existing talent, because if we are not able to compete from a salary and compensation perspective, they will leave us. I'd love to see in the chat how many of you hit me with an exclamation point if you've had staff leave just because they got a better offer of pay. Right? So that's one thing. And then you're also, when you're charging the correct amount, when you're making your profit margin that you're shooting for, you're able to invest in hiring the right talent, make sure that you're taking care of your existing talent, and you're also able to invest in the appropriate platforms and tools and services, marketing, sales resources to continue to grow your business. So these are the reasons why we kind of look at our entire client list and start segmenting it into A, B, and C. A and B clients and maybe those C customers, and we start there.
well, starting with that, just wanted to highlight Jordan here has dropped a comment in with a few exclamations. So I think that means, hey, this is a big deal here. So, so you said drop an exclamation, excuse me, Mark. And, if you've struggled with any of these things, and especially you got to keep your staff, right? And, that there's more than pay, but pay is certainly a big component there. And I'm glad you said that. And thank you for commenting, Jordan, because anybody else, please feel free to jump in. But, I think I'll speak for myself. Anybody else drop a comment in, but sometimes we go, well, some of us are a little more money oriented, and some of us think, I just need to provide good service, and they've been with me for a long time, so I don't want to charge more. And I failed to realize that's why I'm not able to invest, or that's why here's another one. Maybe my staff is stretched too thin, but I can't make the next hire. So there's a lot of these symptoms that I feel like if you don't have the right mindset, that can kind of seep in. What would you say to that, Eric?
I mean, some of these topics are pretty apparent to a business owner that has run an organization for a while, right? The first thing that we've got to, and how do we get here? When we first, start our business, like me, my first IT practice, I'm like, we were signing people up that could fog a mirror, right? Because we had to keep the lights on, right? So this is how it starts, and sometimes you have to start that way. Sometimes we think, boy, if somebody would have tapped me on the shoulder, 20 years ago and said, don't take C customers, just shoot for the A's. Sometimes it takes a long time to get to that A client because those A clients need corroboration, right? They need proof of performance. If you have no clients, it's hard to get an A client, right? So you're going to take those folks, and this is just how it typically works, right? So you've got these folks that you've brought on early on, and maybe you haven't reached a maturity level yet that allows you to really understand how to price or what even your services cost. I mean, that was one of the big challenges that we had, a month of conversations about, okay, we want to stop delivering reactive break fix services. We want to deliver these flat rate IT services, but what do we charge? And we had there were no resources or experts or consultants back then about managed services. I mean, we had to figure it out ourselves, which is kind of why we're identified as, kind of leading pioneers in this space, the tip of the spear of this. And I'll tell you, Damien, those first, round of agreements that we did get our A clients to sign for managed services, they were severely underpriced once we figured out and analyzed how much we were doing, because we were like, well, what should we charge? Would we charge them by device? Do we charge them this way? And it was all about devices back then. So you get to this, level of understanding over time that says, well, we have these clients. This is how we got here. We brought them on early and we've kept them because they were the only source of revenue we had. So that's how we got here. And then, to your point about, keeping staff and hiring the right staff, when we were building our practice, the cost of doing business was a lot lower than it is today, right? Mm-hmm. So today, when you're looking to hire, technology resources, holy cow, especially, after the pandemic, those salary requirements are very, very high. You've got cybersecurity experts, good luck, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Managing, backup and disaster recovery platforms, even at a level 1 position, are, $15,000 to $20,000 more a year than we were looking at maybe our, middle or high engineering labor rates back in the, late 90s, right? Yeah. So these are the economic indicators that force us as leaders to say, okay, let's maintain not only a strategy of how to wean ourselves of C customers over time, but a strategy to increase our rates every single year at a minimum. And I don't mean just keeping up with the cost of inflation. I mean making sure that we're making our profit margin above and beyond that every single year. And I love Andrew's comment here about, hey, is there a checklist for identifying which customers should be on the short list? And yes, I've come up with a checklist. I actually have a blog post. We'll link if we can, Damien, below to that blog post. But it talks about creating a scorecard of what your ideal clients look like, and then a rating system to go through your entire client list on a regular basis to see where they fall. And so there's some prescriptive insight in that scorecard that you'll be able to take a look at later. But
so I'll have somebody on my team grab the link, even while we're doing it, if possible. Which one do you know off the top of your head? With the title or anything like that, Eric? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Probably a blog post on ericksimpson.com that talks about it's time to fire your clients, something like that. Okay. So
we'll dig that up. And while we are, if you don't mind me interrupting, I just wanted to get the other part of what Andrew said, because I'm sure your checklist probably covers this, but I love what you said, Andrew. So if we don't answer this, Andrew or anybody else, please let us know. But the checklist is one part. But he said, let's say a customer adopts best practices in BCDR, but not cybersecurity. Like what do I do? What's the stopgap? Because I think we're all struggling to say, this is my stack. This is what I know you need. And then you bring it and they're like, I'm going to take 4 out of 5 or, 3 out of 6.
And that's a great question, Andrew, a great 2-part question. So my response to that is this. You've got to identify and determine what the minimum services are that a client needs to subscribe to become a client and to remain a client. We have this conversation a lot in our industry, Damien, where it's the exact question that Andrew is asking. Is like, well, they're taking some of my stuff, but I need them to sign up for my enhanced cybersecurity services because I'm at risk, they're at risk, and who's going to pay for remediation if something bad happens? We know it's going to happen. The statistics tell us that it's just a matter of time before a cyber threat happens to a business. And the majority of these cyber attacks, we hear about the big ones, but the majority of these cyber attacks are happening to the SMB if you look at the statistics. So my guidance would be, Andrew, to determine what your minimum requirements are. And because I like selling in bundles, I don't know what your particular industry is, but if you can bundle your services into a good, better, best, it gives you a lot of flexibility in moving clients up and down into those different bundles instead of selling a point product or solution or an upgrade to one thing, right? You can upgrade the entire organization if you're selling on a per user type of a billing model or a SaaS type of a billing model. It makes it easier to do that and get everybody upgraded to the same standardized platforms that you support. But that minimum bundle of service or your minimum package of services are what you stand by. And that is the first checklist item is, will that client sign up for my minimum recommended package of services? And if you're a technologist or an IT provider or an MSP, it's going to include cybersecurity. And if they decide not to opt in to take that or try to, negotiate and tear your portfolio or bundle apart, then guess what? They are not a good fit for your organization, because as we all know, not only are our clients targets for these cyber terrorists, so are we as the service providers, and so are, our supply chain, our vendors, platforms, and all these other things. And one last tip I'll throw in on top as a cherry, that minimum bundle of services, if you are supporting their technology, not only has to include the cybersecurity, enhanced cybersecurity, whatever it is that you require, but that has to include services that meet the minimum requirements of that business owner's cyber liability insurance policy. Why? Because when you're quoting your client these services, this is a statement of work that says you are going to provide the services within this statement of work. And you're going to price your services because you understand what your costs are and what your margins are going to be and what your profit margins need to be. And that's what you sell to the client. And you do these things. You are not responsible for that client's cybersecurity posture. You're responsible for delivering the services in your statement of work. Be very careful about, what your website says. Don't put things up there that say, hey, we take care of all your cybersecurity concerns so you can sleep good at night. Holy cow, we've seen enough legal challenges and MSPs brought into court arguing that the client thought you were handling everything, right? We used to say that ourselves, right? That's something we learned. So you have to conform to the minimum requirements of that cyber liability insurance policy. It's going to ask for things like password changes on a regular basis. It's going to ask for two-factor authentication. It's going to ask for backup and BDR service. It's going to ask for all these things, end user security awareness training. As long as you have those things in your minimum bundle, if there is an incident, that's how the remediation gets paid for, because the client will file a claim against their policy to cover that. And sometimes the remediation goes way beyond what you're doing, right? They may have to bring in forensic folks. I mean, it depends. I've seen every size of response in these situations. And you would think that the larger responses come from larger organizations that get breached. But I've seen the opposite too. I've seen huge responses come from very small organizations because of what they do, the kind of data that was compromised, and et cetera. So there's other variables there. So that's how you determine what the gap is between what your existing clients may be paying you for and what you're delivering to them, and what you want them to consume from you in services. You have to make that determination. And then you stack rank your clients and you aggressively go after them and say, hey, we need to enhance your cybersecurity posture. We need to enhance your backup and disaster recovery strategy. We need to enhance these things so that we can remain business partners together, so we can continue to deliver and support your organization. Because if you do not, then you're not only putting my organization at risk, but by default, you're putting all of my other clients at risk as well. Because if you think about it one way, Damien, how fair is it that 99%, let's say 99% of clients sign up and they sign up for that package, and now we're delivering service, our standardized services, we can scale it because this is what we built, this is what we support, and 1% of these customers do not. And then one of those 1% has a cybersecurity breach.
Right.
What do
Right.
we do? Do we just let them swing in the wind? I always ask this question when I'm speaking live in an audience. I mean, do we let them swing in the wind? Yes or
Right.
no? And the answer resoundingly is no. No, we're good people. We want to help. But then
We work 24/7 trying to
now,
help them.
yeah, now
Yeah.
we're in a tight bind, right? Because now we're consuming all of our resources to try to help this client who is not invested in our services, has not invested in our enhanced platforms and all this, to the detriment of supporting all of our other clients that have.
Mm. Mm.
And then how do
Well,
we build and how do we build them for that? And do they don't have budget laying around to pay for? So we're not aligning with their policy, and now we have a problem. So
yeah,
don't put
the
yourselves
cheap
in that
client.
situation. Yeah, don't put yourselves in that situation. Have these conversations with clients now and
Yeah.
avoid the risk later. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Damien.
No, no, no. It's just it makes a lot of sense. The cheap client certainly is not the one that set aside a contingency budget for when bad things happen when they ignored your advice. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Almost every MSP I've met, they're good people. They would work 24/7. Their staff. I've talked to some that bad things have happened when the client ignored them. They work 24/7, and then they cut their price because they couldn't afford it because they didn't have that budget. So it's a lose lose lose. So I wanted to interject this. Anybody that's listening who's on the live can see this, but if you're listening later, we dropped in the link to Erick's blog on how to fire clients, which I think is the one you're referencing with the checklist. Is that right?
Yeah, I think
Wonderful.
so. Yeah.
And then just to kind of continue there, Andrew has said that I've started doing this on net new clients and MSA that has a bundled CS, BCDR, proactive block time, RMM, et cetera. So awesome. And that sounds like you're going the right track. Andrew, in my experience, started doing it on net new, is the way to approach it. But that also kind of brings us into the how do we do something different. And then, real quickly, you said Andrew says he's lucky to have clients who present us with the security insurance form and request our guidance. That is wonderful, right? A lot of them just hand you it and say, fill it out or make it happen. And in my experience, some MSPs are caught a little flat-footed because they, using your words, Erick, they expect you to do it all. They expect you're the everything. And then when something comes across and, do you do this? Did you do that? Do you have a 24/7 SOC with incident response built? That's what the insurance thing says. You don't do that for me. I mean, there's a lot of these things that either weren't or still aren't in any base tier. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how do you align there?
Yeah, and I noticed Paul has a comment there. It's a strong no about, and I'm not going to guess what this is, what he's responding negatively to, but what I'll say is this: when a client hands you that insurance form, the number one thing that you do not want to do is to say where it says who's responsible for the cybersecurity or the security or the liability or any of that. Never put your company's name or your name on that. That is not your responsibility. That is the business owner's responsibility. You can only do what you can do within your statement of work. Now, if the client wants you to do more stuff and you're willing to do that, then you will include that in your SOW, in your statement of work, and agree to it and charge the client commensurately, right? But you are ultimately not responsible for the cybersecurity of that client's organization. That is not, if you're the outsource provider, no matter what it is that you're providing, whether it's cybersecurity or service desk or NOC, SOC, or just general IT services, you are not responsible for that. And don't feel compelled to check things off that you cannot demonstrate compliance to just because the client is pressuring you. You just brought up, Damien, hey, what about, SOC and all this? And some of these folks are saying, hey, no, do you have, a SOC? Do you have a SIM? Do you have SOC 2 compliance? If you cannot demonstrate compliance, and remember, it's not incumbent upon you to demonstrate this compliance. You may not be providing these other services. So you need to let the client know, hey, attach these documents to demonstrate that you have that here. I'm not going to, agree to this. I will just answer the questions that pertain to me and the sale that I deliver to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I would never assume any responsibility for that. Your responsibility is to deliver the services that you've agreed to for the compensation that the client has agreed to pay you. You are not responsible, and absolve yourself. And I know I live in California, Damien, so you could get drug into court, based on the weather changing out here, right? It's not, so it's not going to stop you potentially from getting drug into court, but it may stop you from any further monetary damage when you can say, look, we disclaimed any responsibility for that. Here's our sal. Here's what we delivered. That is it.
Right. Well, that made me think of something we were talking about backstage, where you had mentioned what I would call an interesting one regarding back in your IT days regarding backup and disaster recovery. It seemed like it ties into some of this. Would you mind sharing that, Eric?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, you don't, your journey, if you're an IT provider in any shape or form, isn't always smooth sailing, right? So we have our challenges, we have our rough patches, we have our awkward moments, let's say, in delivering
Mm-hmm.
service to clients. And for us, even though we were early available back then, so we were selling solutions like tape libraries, auto changers, and things like that, with appropriate software to do the backups. And some of these clients that we had either had antiquated services and solutions or platforms or devices or whatever, and we would always try to get them to upgrade. But part of our responsibility was also to make sure that the backups were configured correctly. In fact, Damien, one of the first places I always looked when I went into a new prospect's sales conversation was to review the configuration of their backups. And 95% of the time, I found opportunities to share with that business owner how all their data wasn't being backed up by their current provider. And that was like the first thing that I looked for, and we could drive a wedge there and win some business. Well, we would also promote to our clients that not only would we ensure that everything was being backed up that should be backed up, but we would be checking those backups with test restores and things like that.
Mm.
So a horrible story happened with us because we had never had an issue where we could not ensure the recovery of data for one of our clients until we did. And so we had a very large nonprofit client, and my team was, they knew the protocol, they knew the process, they knew that they were supposed to be checking and testing these backups. And so we get a call from our contact at this client, and she said, "Hey, we have overwritten some data by accident or corrupted some data. I don't remember what happened. Something got deleted, and it was a lot of work that they had done recently in their database. It was a client database or something." And so I said, "Okay, no problem. We got the ticket here. We'll take care of it." And I didn't think anything of it, right? It's kind of a day-to-day thing. They'll store the data. And so my lead engineer comes, to talk to me later in the day, just before quitting time, and says, "Hey, we got a problem." And I said, "Okay, what?" He says, "Yeah, we can't restore that data." And I said, "What do you mean you can't restore the data?" He says, "Yeah, we cannot restore the data." And I said, well, then I got involved, and I looked at this data, and I said, well, and it wasn't just that data. This is where it got even worse, where I started really sweating. We can restore any data. And there was some misconfiguration somehow in how their backup was configured. Now, I had configured it originally, a couple of years ago, and had tested, and it was fine. So something had happened along the way. And I'm sorry to say that my team was not testing the restores like they were supposed to, because they were firefighting and we were just overloading them with stuff. This was in our period of, hey, we'll take on anybody, we'll do work for everybody, and didn't have that maturity to say, let's make sure that, we're not firefighting, that we're only working with the right clients, that we're spending the time that we need and charging the clients for that. Because that's the other thing. You always throw in everything in the kit and caboodle and sell it to the client as a big package. And then later it's like, okay, well, prioritize the things we need to do and make sure that, we can demonstrate we're doing a good job. But some of these other things kind of fall by the wayside. Unfortunately, that's what happened to us. So one of my technicians, it was a very, very difficult conversation that I had with this person. And I had to go back to our contact person at that client. And after trying everything that we could, even getting support from our backup solution vendor and, the hardware vendor and all that, it was time to call a rose at this point. And so I had a meeting. I drove over, met with our contact, and I just fell on my sword, Damien. And I apologized. I said, listen, this has never happened to us. I know this doesn't help, but I'm so sorry. We cannot recover that data for you. And here's how it got worse. Then she said to me,
Oh no.
Oh my goodness. She said, well, I will put my entire team to work. I think it'll take us, because she said, I'll put my entire team to work to try to recreate this data. And I said, really? I felt really, really bad, right? This is an awkward conversation. And she says, yes, I'll do that. And she says, look, let me get with my team and figure this out. They had like paper copies of everything back then, because, we were just burning trees down back in the day.
Yeah.
That's how we ran. And so she said, it's going to take us about 7 days for the entire team. And this was like 7 people, 7 days, 8 hours a day. And I said to her, well, let me know what that, I'm so sorry, right? Let me know what that cost is and we'll figure out a way to make it right for you. And she goes, oh no, are you kidding me? I can't let leadership know this happened. So that even put even worse stress and pressure on me, right? Because it would have made her look bad, her team look bad, us look bad, and it would have just rolled downhill from there. So it was a very bad story. And after that, you better believe, Damien, that we adjusted our processes and made sure that we were doing it. But it cost so much that we didn't lose the relationship, but we certainly lost, a lot of our reputation. And, she was a friend. So we kind of eroded that friendship with her as well. And it costs so much in their labor time, and it costs us, so much in labor to check and verify those backups. And I got to tell you, back in the day, it was all manual stuff. There wasn't multi-tenant and alerts and all the things and automation and AI that we have today, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the most time-consuming activity that our entire service desk did for any client, was making sure to check, verify, test backups. That was kind of, it costs a lot to do that. Now things are a lot different. I'm happy to say, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Eric. I also just, I was an MSP and I thought I had it, and I used a best of breed tool, and then our client crashed and I went to restore. And that's when I realized I couldn't. So my story is unfortunately eerily similar in the beginning. And man, it was one of our biggest clients. And I thought, this could be a long day or night to restore everything, but I thought we could do it. And I thought that, my techs, we were very savvy. We'll figure this out. We'll get it back. We'll do something. And after a lot of work and tens of hours with the vendor, I was unable to restore the data. Actually, more accurately, I was able to successfully restore the corrupted data. And as you can imagine, that didn't win me any friends. The best thing they did was fire me. It's the personal relationship. It's the feeling of despair. And so anyway, that's what personally led me to start Servosity. So this is sponsored by Servosity. And there's only, in my mind, only 2 things we do differently. I do what you would do if you had an entire team that's all they could do was think about. We manage your backups for you. So there's no more babysitting them, no more spending all your help desk time doing that. So we're kind of an MSP for an MSP just for backups. And then the part that I think is the most important is we manage them to test them for you. So we test daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. Everything from every volume every day to full DR cloud spin up every single quarter for every single client, non-negotiable built in. And lastly, the process, I think, is the valuable part. So if you'd like that process, or you'd just like to pick my brain, visit servosity.com/call. And lastly, Eric, as we're switching back to talk about process, I think it's super important. I know we were talking about it backstage, and anybody who wants to go to servosity.com/call and have a conversation with me, I'd be happy to give you a copy of our entire process, and you can use it with any tool. That may sound like a crazy thing for a vendor to say. Take my process, I call it steal my process, use it with your tool. If you just take one thing away, that's a victory for me. It's also a victory if we do business. But if we don't, for whatever reason, I don't want you to end up where I ended up and where Eric ended up.
Wow. That's great. Great thought leadership, Damien. And that's kind of how I've, built my reputation as well, is sharing best practices. The rising tide lifts all ships. And,
Yeah.
The folks that take advantage of these tools, they appreciate it. And that opens up conversations and opportunities for you to prove value to them. So nicely done there. I'd like to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about, if I could, kind of this process, right? So you said, hey, we're going to get back into process. Let's talk about process of, we
Yes.
understand the why now, right? I think we've covered the why. Why should we look at, culling the herd a little bit? I have a colleague of mine that calls it pruning the garden, right?
Mm.
In my blog post, I use the analogy of building a championship sports team, right? So I talk about, let's say that you're a team owner, you sports team, whatever your flavor of sport is that you enjoy, and you're an owner, and you want to get to the championship every single year. Well, what do we see in great sports teams and sports leaders and sports stories? We see them making player trades, right? There's always a recruitment phase. There's player trades during the season, and what these owners and coaches and leaders are doing is they're trying to put together the winning team to get them to the championship that year. And so I use that analogy here. Here, you're the sports team owner or the coach, and your players are your clients. How many of your clients, if you were a sports team trying to compete for the championship, how many of your existing clients or customers would you keep knowing that they are going to help you get to the championship? So this is kind of what we're talking about here in kind of a layman's terms, Damien, is, hey, I need to make some player trades in order to get me to that championship. And the player trades, the requirements for the player trades, again, are different, right? The scorecard that you establish that says, look, in order to be considered to be a client today, this is what our folks have to look at. Could be 8 or 10 things. In my blog post, I think I talk about, the scorecard and the different values, and then you add your own there, and each has a point value. And if they're below a certain point value, then guess what? They're on the trade list. Now, which ones do you trade first? The ones that have the lowest points on the scorecard, right? These are the ones that, and we're big baseball fans here at the house. We're Angels fans, we're Rams fans. So we know that, in particular, the Angels have made some bad hiring decisions, right? They've got a player that's been out on the IL, 200 or some, days, and they're paying him like the third most salary of anybody on the team. And this player, but when he's on, he's on. But boy, it's so inconsistent. So everybody's like griping about this particular player. It's like, oh my God, and they can't get rid of the contract because it's worth so much. Nobody's going to buy it. So they're stuck in this situation, right? So don't put yourself in that situation early on. Identify where these C customers are. And I like using the analogy of a pyramid, right? So imagine a pyramid, and imagine the pyramid is segmented into 3 sections. The top part of the pyramid is the smallest section. These are your A clients. They typically represent the smallest total number of clients that you have compared to the smallest number of clients you have compared to the total number of clients. The B section of the pyramid, the next section down from the tippy top A, is a little bit wider and broader. Those are your B clients. And then the widest part at the base of the pyramid are those C customers. These may be C customers based on legacy, cost, price. Maybe they're just a pain in the butt to deal with. How many of you have fired a client? Hit me with an exclamation point in the chat. How many of you have fired a client not because they weren't paying you on time or paying you what you are worth, but because they were just hard to deal with or just a pain in the butt? I mean, I've fired clients because they've cussed out one of my staff. That was it. Like, you're done. I don't care how much you represent. You are not going to disrespect my team, right?
That's
and
right.
and the team respects that and appreciates that, right? So these C customers at the bottom, these are the folks that we want to analyze and assess. And I'm going to share, Damien, where I got this idea. I didn't invent this idea of, pruning your garden or culling the herd or making player trades and all that. I had a client of mine who was a great client, probably the smartest business person, one of the smartest business people I've ever met, owned an accounting firm. And, I was just starting to, really try to become more strategic and strategically valuable to my clients, and was having these, quarterly business reviews, kind of a little bit of a virtual CIO, CTO type of a meeting with them. And I was asking, his name was Scott. I said, Scott, what is it that you'd like to see the organization do? What is it you're trying to achieve here with this accounting firm? And he said, I want to be the highest priced accounting firm in Orange County. And this is Orange County, California, one of the counties here. And I'd never heard anybody say anything like that. It was very bold. And so I said, wow, I thought, that's a big, hairy, audacious goal to say, I want to be the most expensive thing, right? And so I said, well, how are you going to do that, Scott? And he says, oh, well, every year I go through this exercise. I have A, B, and C clients. And my C clients, and he explained to me what I'm sharing here now for you. So it's great keeping, giving him credit for this and keeping this idea alive. And he explained to me very simply. In his case, he didn't fire his C clients, but he sold those accounts to other smaller accounting firms that were happy to take them, right? So again, to me, if it's a bad C customer, I'm not going to wish that on even a competitor, right? But if it's a C customer that just, hey, we've outgrown them, they can't keep up or they have other needs. We did keep a network of other IT providers, and we would introduce them to them. We didn't sell them to them, but we would just try to find a nice home for them. And this is kind of how we did this process that I'll get into next. It's kind of like, how do you handle these? Like we were promoting today's session about, what's the best way to do it, what not to do, what to do, and things like that. So we'll get into some of that as well. But then he said, and then I raised my rates, right? So I'll sell off these C clients of mine. I raise my rates for every new client we bring on the next year. And then I do the same thing every year. So I was asked on a panel once what my opinion was of, hey, because some folks said, well, we do it no matter what. We're always going to churn through those C and now they may be C clients at that point, right? When you've done this a few cycles, it gets easier. It's a process. And we'll talk about, how to get there and get your mind at ease with it. I mean, the first time you do it, it's hard. It's like, firing an employee the first time. It's so difficult. It's never easy, right? But you learn how to prepare for it in advance. You learn how to, even during the sales process with a client, to introduce the give and the get for the relationship. Like, we align in these areas. we are a growth minded company. We're looking for growth minded clients to move forward with us. And so there are ways to, to not make it quite like seem unprepared or jarring or something like that. And we can have a little bit of Q&A on that as well. But, my approach was, well, if they're a good client, why not just keep them? But then if I analyze my whole premise behind this to say, well, your goal is to make sure that you're hitting your profit margin across all your clients. So then one could argue, Damien, well, then you do it just like Scott did it. Every year you find homes for those C clients. Maybe at that point, they're customers in the pyramid, maybe, and I use customers if there's not a good strategic relation, but let's say all of your clients now fit your mold, right? Because that's the question you have to ask yourself as a business owner. Well, let's say all your clients are scoring high on your scorecard. What now? Adjust your scorecard. Right? Adjust your scorecard. Now the profit margin has to be this. Maybe you're focusing in these verticals. Maybe you're doing something different. And the idea here is to continue to grow and maximize revenue, because and remember, if we could continue to increase profit over time without losing staff or without having to, continually hire staff, isn't that the best case scenario? You could scale more broadly as you automate and standardize on some things. You may be making other decisions in your business that allow you to even scale even more broadly, right? Maybe consolidating multiple vendors and going with a vendor that has, a more comprehensive solution that's more cost effective, or that allows you to reduce kind of the screens that everybody has to work in to do their job, and to have, that single pane of glass experience, or to stop delivering. Here's the other, thing nugget: stop delivering lower margin services. Look at what's in our product portfolio in our bundle. And sometimes we have a blended margin that may help us meet or get close to our target margin. But if we actually analyze everything that's in that bundle, there may be one or two items in there that are far below the target profit margin that we want for all of our services. So maybe stop delivering those services as long as they don't impact, the requirements that you've established for yourself to support a client, or replace them with alternatives that allow you to bring that margin back up, right? So these are the other little drivers on pricing and profit.
That's awesome, Erick. I know we've linked to your post, and it's in the video if you're listening. But I wanted to ask, just give me some nuggets to think about. How do you grade? And you don't have to give me everything. I'm sure that's a bigger topic, but give me some. Is it just the ones I don't like and I don't click with? Is it just the ones that pay late? Like, I'd love to hear, like, if I'm just getting started, I'm scared, I don't know what I'm doing. After the first one, I may have a better idea. But if I'm just getting started, like, what are the common ones I should think about?
Well, number one is, are they growing? Or are they stagnant? I mean, I'm not going to give you any order, but here are the things to think about. Are they growing? Or are they stagnant? Right? Because if they're not growing, then you're going to have a tough time truing them up to your current rates as your costs go up, et cetera. If they're not growing and they're not building their profit margins and doing the things that we're talking about here, it's going to be tough for them to continue to justify affording your continually increased prices if you can't add more value to that organization or relationship. So that's the key. You're going to continue to evolve to add more value to your client relationships and their organizations. And if they can't afford those, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, how often do we go out and buy a new car, right? We always have different models of car that we could get, right? Do we want the one with the heated steering wheel and leather and panoramic sunroof and lane avoidance and all the high tech that comes in it? Or do we get the middle one or the base model, right? So if you're no longer offering some of those features and services and the client can't justify it, then that would be one. Number two, are they someone you'd enjoy going out and having lunch or a beer or coffee with? I mean, that's a big one for me, right? once you get to a point in your maturity of your business where, again, being more relationship driven, do your clients align with your culture and your ethics? Right? Early on in my career, we brought on some clients that, once we were working with them for a little while, we just felt like, we don't like working with them just because they didn't align with our culture, or maybe they were, didn't, and not that they were doing anything illegal or anything like that, right? It wasn't that egregious, because we would have never taken them on in the first place. It was just something like, it's just something about that relationship and what they're doing that, it just didn't match me personally, right? What I felt, I wanted to build. Like, I didn't want to bring on 5 of those types of clients, that kind of thing, right? So if you don't want to bring on more of those types of clients, you probably shouldn't be serving that client anyway. Obviously, profit margin is one of the categories that we look at. And so total client value, right? So how long do you typically keep a client? In our case, it was, between 5 and 10 years. And what does that total forecasted client value look like? So this goes to that growth thing. If they're going to be stagnant the whole time, then guess what? Here's another reason. It's probably one of the biggest ones to exit an existing client, is because it makes room for another client that aligns with these things, that is more profitable. And I would argue, Damien, that getting rid of it may not even be a C customer, maybe a D or even an F customer, right? That is just like, they don't call us that often, they're there, but when they do call, it does take time, energy, and effort to support them, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe it's a noisy C customer. Maybe they're just so noisy that it is taking more of your labor pool to serve that client. And let's just say everything else is probably in the okay range. But if you could replace that one C customer, maybe you could serve 2 A clients, or an A client and a B client, because your requirements for those clients are so different, right? So that's the other trade-off, is how much noise do they create and how much distraction. Or maybe you're delivering services to them that you're not delivering to anyone else anymore. Like, we had a couple of clients back in the days when we had to keep the lights on that we said, we've never seen that before. We had a client that had they're doing like a lighting, electrical, and HVAC control systems for malls and big department stores. And they would dial in these slow modems. They were like not even 9600 baud modems. And this was in the, early 2000s. So there was like 56K baud modems back then, or even, internet. But they had built this legacy technology on this stuff from these vendors that didn't exist anymore. So their platforms were always causing problems. And they asked us to support that. And our team did figure out how to support it and didn't have to, find support from non-existing vendors anymore. But at the end of the day, they were just kind of this odd duck, in the zoo. They were just some different thing. And that was all we did for them. And so, we decided that was one client that we needed to exit so that we could bring on better clients, or newer clients, or clients that fit within our business model and vision moving forward. So I know we're getting close on time here. So I do want to make sure that we touch on how. Yeah. How do we exit? When you're ready, Damien.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I've got how, and then I had a question related to that, which is like, if they're on the line, how do I balance or tip that? Maybe they're in between the B and C or something like that. Was one of the ones that came in on social before. So Tim asked, kind of, how do I, between embracing them and kind of on the firing line?
Yeah, I think being completely transparent with your clients from the get-go is always, I think, a good approach. So if you're having, and I know that you're not typically spending a lot of time with C clients or C customers. You're probably spending more time with your A clients and maybe your B clients, trying to get them to become more A clients. But when we were going through, I'll share a story about, our transitioning all of our like 226 or 225 and 250 customers that we had into becoming MSPs. Again, we call it flat rate IT. MSP wasn't a thing yet. And our strategy was to meet with every one of them and say, hey, here's what, here's where we're going. Here's what we would like you to subscribe to. And here are the benefits that you're going to get from that. And a lot of our customers didn't want to do it. They're like, well, Erick, we had painted ourselves into a corner, right? And the corner was, you're the best, you're the cheapest, and you're the fastest. So that was how we used to sell ourselves, right? Then we learned, right? That's not where the value is, because we're just a commodity then, and we're just evaluated by our price. And so a lot of and that was our fault, right? Because we were immature back then, starting up, practice and growing, but we were smarter now, or trying to be anyway. And so a lot of them said, no, we'd just like to stay with this. And so we were, okay, so those are definitely the C customers, right? The ones that didn't want to go. Now we had our A clients that didn't maybe understand everything that we were saying, right? They didn't understand, oh, well, okay, Erick, we trust you, right? Those are the best clients. Right. Those are, we have the best relationships. So we trust you. So go ahead, we'll sign up and pay you in advance, right? Nice. Rather than after the fact and all that. And then we had this middle group of what we thought were, so we thought we knew what our A clients were. We thought we knew who our B clients were, and we thought we knew who our C customers would be. We're definitely right on most of the C customers. The Bs, though, we were hit and miss. So there were some actual in the B clients that we thought we could convince to come over. There were some C customers in there in disguise, right? That we now were having these more direct strategic conversations. And they're like, oh, they're definitely not a B client. They're not a growth. They're not strategic. They're not doing these things. But we also found some A clients in there in disguise that we just hadn't had. We're not spending enough time with them to develop that relationship into an A client that we're ready to spend more money with us. Another reason to cull the herd and prune your garden and fire some customers so you can spend more time with these more strategic clients that have budget. And so through that transformation, we went from like 226 customers and we signed 67 of all of them to a managed service agreement. Wow. And then, which was a win for us, even though we had to raise the prices the next year because we were hopefully, we now had data that could tell us how we should price after a year of delivering service, right? We had nothing then. So these C customers, we had to have very distinct conversations or direct conversations with them and letting them know that I don't recommend this for everybody, or if it's a huge list of clients. I mean, this is how I did it and how I would do it again, but maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea. But I went out and I introduced each one of these to these other providers that we had relationships with. And we just found them homes. And it took us a long time to do that over time. And there were two clients. So I'll caution you on this. There were two clients that said, because one of our tactics at first was, I'll back up, well, we'll just double our price for everybody that wants to stay and that doesn't want to sign up for our flat rate IT subscription. We'll just double the price. And that'll get them to sign up. Well, right. It kind of backfired on us in this way. It definitely told us who wasn't going to move forward. But then there were two clients that said, oh yeah, we'll pay that. So it was like double our rate and then a minimum of 2 hours. So it was like, if you needed us to come out, it was going to be something crazy. Like back then, $350 just for us to show up. And two of our clients says, yeah, we'll take that plan. And so we thought, okay, well, at least we're getting paid for it, right? Yeah. But later on, after everybody was standardized and all on the same platforms, and we're, patching and updating and doing everything. And back then we were using, remind me what the remote access product was. PC Anywhere with over the modem. That's how we did the dial-up. Yeah. It was crazy times, right? So, but these two clients would call and they would be very demanding and they wanted somebody out there in the next hour. And even though we were charging them for it, it became a nuisance. And so again, it's not all about what somebody pays you. It's about, does it fit with everything else and is not a distraction, it isn't noisy. And we ultimately exited those as well. So how do we have that,
Erick? Yeah. How do you, and are we taking us there? How do we do that? Like, what's the best way to do it? Just as kind of our parting thoughts on that.
Yep. So just a couple of thoughts here. And I think my blog post goes into more detail on that. But basically, just have a sit down with these clients and let them know it's I mean, if you've ever had a client have a sit down with you and they're firing you, you know what good looks like, and you probably know what bad looks like, right? Because we've had, different experiences. So you just want to be candid with a client and upfront. And, there are some phases to this. So if you're trying to get them to true up and you want to keep them, then a series of conversations and communications that say, that express why you're moving in this direction, what value you're offering them in addition to what they're getting, and then when they can expect to see these price increases. So there's two approaches. Like there's the regular yearly price increase where I say, look, don't ask for forgiveness or don't ask for permission first. Send the letter out. And my recommendation is you raise your rates every year so the client expects it. Hey, it's almost like I liken it to, an HBO subscription or a streaming subscription. Those prices they just let you know, hey, on this date, our prices are going up this much. Now, don't be egregious about it, right? You're not going to get somebody that's paying you, I'm just picking a number out of the air, $50 an hour to $100 an hour and be okay with it, right? But if it's someone that you want to keep, then you have some conversations with them initially and say, hey, here's what things are costing us now. Your costs have gone up. Our costs have gone up. Here's what our current rates are. We'd love to keep you as a client, but we need to begin raising your rates in a regular fashion to get us to this point. And you've got to give them something additionally. I would imagine that you're probably giving them something less than what your current clients are getting because you're not going to, add more to their bundle when they're not paying for it, right? So show the value, show their options. And another argument is the minimum requirements of them to remain a client with you is a strong motivator. And why? Like, this is why we're enhancing cybersecurity. We're investing in these tools. We're going to do end user security awareness training. We're going to make sure that we're automating, testing, and demonstrating your backups are running clean. All the things that you may not be doing now, but then you have to do them. We're also going to have, now, if you have A clients, you're probably having more strategic meetings with them yearly. Bs, maybe not as much. So maybe A clients, you're meeting with them quarterly. Bs, you're maybe meeting with them biannually. Cs, as needed. Right? So there may be a little value that you can say, look, here, we're going to do this and we're going to add this, and we need you to move forward with us this way. And give them a due date to agree. And that this will take effect, September 1st. You'll start seeing, here's the new agreement, and your invoice will reflect that, right? So these are just human ways to sit down and speak with clients about where they're going. And ultimately, if you've set up your existing agreement with them correctly, you will assist them in transitioning to another provider if that's required for your business, whatever you do. And hopefully there's a clause in your agreement that allows you to bill them for that. Right. So you're not doing it for free either. You're already losing money, right? Why lose more money trying to get them off of your services, right? Sure. And then have and express to them that every year you're going to have a review with them and talk about what next year looks like and where they're going, and then kind of start doing that ABC conversation, that transition conversation. I wouldn't point out, that it's costing you too much money to support them. I wouldn't point out that they're noisy and belligerent and angry or any of that. Just say that, you're evaluating the relationship and you want to make sure that they're being served by an organization that can actually meet their needs within their budget requirements. So you can introduce that and use the term budget. Don't use the term price or fees or rates or anything like that, right? Say, to support a client, your size with your needs today, the new clients we're bringing on, requires a budget of about, between this range. And so as you can see, we've got quite a gap here. So what can we do together to try to close that gap if it makes sense, and continue the conversation? Now, the first time you have this conversation with clients, it's going to be rough, right? It's going to be a little bit awkward. Practice it. and don't schedule a bunch of meetings. Like if it's 10 clients you want to, exit, don't do them like in 1 week, because you've got to process and analyze and reflect on how that conversation went to adjust your approach moving forward. But once you do it the first time, then the second time next year or whenever it happens, or even if you detect a client that just pops up that you weren't expecting now and is becoming a little bit more challenging to support, you now have had that conversation with enough clients where you can sit down and have it in a more candid and objective manner, and then just continue doing that year over year. And if you're going to take Scott's approach that I shared, and like every year we're just going to continue to raise our rates, and we're going to exit these C clients. My approach would be send out a rate increase letter every year. And a lot of clients that I work with, Damien, they're afraid. Oh, do we just send them a letter and don't ask permission? Yes, don't ask permission first. Only deal with the folks that reach out and complain, and don't put anything in the letter. And I have some sample templates on my website that folks can purchase that then kind of talk about this and is a template for the letter. We never say, hey, if you want to chat about this or discuss it, contact me. Nope. This is a letter stating these are our new fees for 2024. These will take effect on your next invoice. Thank you for being, appreciating them and all that, and just letting them know this is what's happening. I guarantee you that a very tiny single-digit percentage of your existing clients are going to reach out and complain. And those that do, you can negotiate that price increase a little bit. Don't not increase it, but make them feel good. Take a point off, maybe. Like if it's a 5% increase, or you're at least going to keep up with inflation, but try to do a little bit better than that, obviously, because cost of business, you can't predict what's happening in the world these days. Like you can't predict what the cost of a gallon of gas is going to be in 2024, right? Who knows?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's powerful stuff, Erick. Thank you for sharing this. Anybody else listening live, please drop a comment. Let us know what you thought of Erick. Let him know how appreciated he is. Erick, this was amazing from my perspective to hear all the experience, the 30,000 MSPs you've coached, the 25 years you've screwed up stuff like me. So thank you for this. Let everybody know how they could get a hold of you if they want to follow you. They would just want to get your newsletter. What's appropriate? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. I mean, you can, my website is ericksimpson.com, ERICK Simpson.com. You can email me at erick@ericksimpson.com, spelled the same way. You can link to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter.
And if you guys are listening, that's on the live feed right now. We've dropped his LinkedIn, his website to ericksimpson.com, even channel mastered. So we will continue to drop more of those there. This has been amazing, Erick. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me, Damien. It was an amazing conversation. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you are listening to this, you have heard an amazing episode, in my opinion, with Erick Simpson of MSP Mindset. We are live every 2 weeks, 2 p.m. Eastern on all the major socials, and drop the following morning on your favorite podcast platforms. Make sure to connect, engage with our guests, enjoy it. If you like what you've heard here, you love what we have upcoming. I'll see you here live in 2 weeks.